Good morning to the Enlightened Path podcast. I'm Patricia Walls, and I'm here with Terri Malek, and she's agreed to come talk to us today. And before I ever hit record, we were having an amazing conversation. And the whole time I was saying, oh my goodness, I should be recording this. And Terri said that they do the same thing with their podcast. And she has a podcast, by the way. She's going to give you the link to that, and I'll put the link in the description for this episode. And so Terri is a Master Energy. I'm reading because there's a lot here. So Terri is a Master Energy Therapist and Educator, Conscious Creator Coach, Transformational Consultant and Speaker, author, storyteller, and mobile entrepreneur. And I had to ask her what that meant. She's going to share that with you. So she specializes in soul inquiry work through deep exploration of the self and the I am presence. Her guidance is offered through a sacred energy container for her clients to dive deep into themselves, beyond their conscious awareness and into their subconscious and unconscious, and into societal programming and into their very soul DNA. The result is the emergence and emancipation of their true soul self and source self. That's a lot. And so I went to Terri's website before this just to get a grasp of what it is that she does, because we're friends on Facebook. That's how she found me and how she applied to be a contributor to the podcast. But I didn't know that much about her. And I went to her website and my head was exploding. I told her, because what she offers is so immense. There's so many programs that she has going, and I'm very excited that you agreed to join us today. So she says she's going to talk to us about surrender, but I got a feeling we're going to expand that a little bit because she's got so much to offer. So welcome, Terri. Give us your wisdom and your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I am so honored to be here, and I just felt called to share that. I found it interesting because I did find you a few years ago on Facebook through mutual friends, and then I learned that where I've had a business home base for several years, you used to live here. So I just thought that was such a beautiful, I'd never connected with you in person when you were here, so I thought that was beautiful in Denison. I'm in a little bit further North Texas than you, but I've also done I used to do quite a bit of work in the Dallas area, I guess is what I'm saying too. So I'm so grateful to be here today and be connecting with you. When I saw the opportunity, I had gotten a message, I can't give the time frame usually, but a while back, to really start saying yes to invitations to be on podcast channels. I've had my own podcast channel for, I'd say from when we started recording, it's actually been 2 years, but since we went live with it, about 1.5 years. And it was time to start branching out and connecting with so many others. And so I said yes, without having any idea what the topic was. So when asked to kind of look at that, I did keep getting surrender. So I'll just start the conversation with what's come through for me, if that's good, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, I'm just looking at notes real quick. So if it's okay, I just want to talk like some key points about surrender. Okay, thank you. So one of the biggest things I find or observe and witness and experience, whatever words we want to put to that, around surrender, is that we as humanity as a whole, often associate surrender with sacrifice. So there's that, that comes from that lack consciousness, separateness consciousness, that I'm going to have to give up something. I have to lose something to go through surrender. And that's just through the experience of being human and societal programming and conditioning and indoctrination and just our experience. So as a whole, humanity does lean more towards that lack separateness consciousness. And so those of us that are here having the opportunity to have these beautiful conversations that are really had such a path of self-awareness and becoming self-realized and sharing that with others, it's I just enjoy how things come to me. So everything that comes, I guess I'll say everything that comes to me comes through me. It's what I learn and apply and, deliver, or I guess I'll say apply and embody and then deliver. So I know if it's coming to me, it's not coming to me just for me, it's for the collective. And it's not just for the collective, I'm very connected to that. So that was a big thing for me for many years on working on surrender, was understanding it's not sacrifice. And something that came to me this morning to share about that, to be just, I'm very transparent and very open and real, just sharing what's called. Something about that, let's see if I can recall where I was going with that. Oh, okay, that we experience it, the language we usually use is as a death. We're losing something, we're having a death of part of us. So there's a lot of resistance around that. There's constriction and resistance because that feels very uncomfortable for us all. And so that point I wanted to make is that I'm not saying it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns and bliss by any means in surrender. It's not. It is going to feel like a death, like a loss. But for me, what's important to share with self and remind myself and share with others is that if you don't come at it with the perspective of lack and separation consciousness, if you come at it from an abundance, wholeness consciousness, rather than seeing it as a loss, I see it as freedom. It's absolute freedom to release and transmute what's not serving, what's not for my highest and best good, or that for the whole, for the collective. So it really is just shifting that perspective. So then that ties into this. I had these memorized, but it's easy when I'm just receiving and transmitting to forget. So that leads into the second one that, I have already said it, actually, I put it all together, but the second one, just a reminder, is that we aren't, actually it connects to that we're not losing something. So the second one is we're not giving something away, or we're not surrendering to something or someone outside of us. And that's a big epiphany for us at some point in our journey, because we're not separate. So when we understand that, it's even more empowering, I feel, to make the decisions to take that journey and say, okay, I'm not giving something or a part of myself or having a death of myself to someone or something else. And what really, I had a little bit of a drive in this morning to my office, and something that was coming through is that sometimes I receive, I know you understand, I receive the information and then have to translate it. So
well, you're a channel, and so stop
I am,
looking
and
at
that
the
happens a
notes,
lot.
just channel the information.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yes, I know you do. And it's like, I have to translate that. Okay, so let's see if I can get it back. Okay, to talk about inferior and superior ego. I haven't talked about this in a few years, and that came back related to this topic. If we are in inferior ego, we are less than, we don't feel worthy, so we feel we have to surrender to someone or something outside of us that has more power, more knowledge, more worthiness, whatever words we want to put to that. And then our superior, when we're in a superior ego, we could say, well, I can't surrender because I can't give my power away, because we associate power with control.
Right.
And that's just societal programming. Again, that we associate our power with control. And so we want to control it. And really, it just comes down to this journey of self-awareness and becoming self-actualized, self-realized really is the harmonizing the ego, the human personality, the personality brain. There's different phrases I put to that, but the personality brain is just finding the harmony within that so that becomes integrated with the higher self, the I am self, the I am presence, all of the highest aspects of us. So that's how we integrate and become embodied. And so being aware of that helps, I feel, with surrender, but also knowing that when you are surrendering, you're healing that, you're creating that balance and harmony within all aspects of self. And then the third key point to tie that to is that, so I'll kind of lead into that, is that reminding us that when I talk about separateness consciousness, we're not separate from God, from source, creator, whatever everybody resonates with around that. We are an aspect of that. We are that. And so in form, incarnated. And so it's just remembering. So if we're surrendering to self, we're also surrendering to source, to create, we're still surrendering to what we've been taught we're surrendering to. And many of us have been taught this in aspects of it, the universe, whatever we want to call it, because we're not separate from that. So to me, that's another awareness key point to say, oh, again, I'm not giving up myself. I am actually doing the opposite. I'm going into myself and learning and remembering that's what I am. To me, I call it remembering more than learning. I am remembering. I am not separate from God, from source, from creator, from the universe, from spirit, from all.
Yeah, I use that word in what I do a lot, remembering, because we already know everything, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. And I can't tell you how many people go, because I don't say I'm learning anymore, but I don't mean it as there's something wrong with learning. I like to add to that phrase, yeah, we are remembering, it's coming back online. So all these things we do, they're activations. And even being, I'm going to do like air quotes, triggered, I have modified my language drastically over the years in my own expansion and growth, and also in my delivery, so that I'm using words that I feel are more inclusive and expansive of what we're really experiencing. And, what we think we're learning, we are, like you said, we are remembering. And so when we go through something we perceive as a trigger to a trauma, that's an activation to remember, to come more and more into our essence and our wholeness. So, yeah, that's really, I guess, to lead into whatever else we're going to talk about. Based off our conversation, even before we started recording, is that I feel called, I know I feel called to share. I don't know how it's going to come out because it's still very raw and I've still been processing, but a recent experience, would that be a good place to go here? I'll allude to something else we may talk about, but I do travel almost full time. I'm here at home base in North Texas, minimum 2 months out of the year. Sometimes that ends up being, 4 or whatever, but, and that's usually, I come back every November and then in May. And then sometimes those extend beyond and before that, depending on, life. But I do travel. Usually our travels are about 4.5 months at a time, 4.5, 5 months at a time, and then we'll come back. So having said that, this is always with my husband. We've been doing this since the end of the summer in 2019. And we had an RV and we would go all over wherever we felt called. And he does nature and wildlife photography, and I do a whole other set of things, plus assist him. So we can talk more about that in a minute. But then I've been getting this call for years, even before that, to do more international travel. And there were all the reasons why I couldn't do that, you know, all the resistance, all the lack of surrender around that. And then 2020 hit, and of course I had a perfectly good reason why I couldn't travel international. And I just really didn't think about it again for a while. And so it's come back in my field. A lot has happened since November when I got back to North Texas of this 2022. And some major expansion and shifts, and I'm way more involved in the community again, which I'm so excited about, but it confused me. Why am I becoming more involved in the community if I'm not even going to be here? And so I'm having an expansion of how that works to have roots and wings, and how my work is global, and how my work is beyond just the physical time and space, which I have known that at some level for many years, but it's now fitting more into the puzzle of the physical and how that's out pictured. So I got this call to go to, not just to Mexico, I've never been, but to Tulum, specifically to the Mayan area. My last call to be immersed in Mayan, I mean, I think maybe was in college or a young adult. I kept thinking that meant Peru. So in my mind, when I do go to the Mayan immersion, to immerse myself in the Mayan culture, it's going to be in Peru. So start getting this call and researching it. And people kept showing up in my field everywhere in our last year and a half of travels, and talking about Tulum and Tulum and Tulum. And so I answered the call and said, yes, I will go to Tulum. The very next day, one of my dear, dear soul sisters posts, she's hosting a retreat in Tulum. And it's called Heart of Oneness. And my first real retreat, I used to facilitate retreats years ago, and it was in a very different way. I heard you say that recently. It was in a very different way than what I do now. It was more around health and wellness. I used to have a business around health and wellness. Before that, dealt with energy in my conscious awareness. But so my first retreat I went to she was the facilitator, her and this other lady that assists her two dear friends, become dear friends, dear sisters, in Mount Shasta, and had major activations, major shifts and changes. So 4 years to the date, this Tulum thing is happening. And it was May 1st through May 8th, and there was a lot of powerful cosmic experiences in those dates. So I said yes. She puts that post up. Oh my gosh, I'm going. And I had to completely redo my whole schedule, all my travel schedule. I hadn't even told my husband that I already called her and said yes before I even talked to my husband. Said, by the way, some things are changing. And so anyway, I went and had some really powerful experiences. There was a lot of preparation, as you know, before you're doing something like this. You're already in it. You're already doing it, having the activations, the experiences. So it was a sacred pilgrimage to me. And to summarize, a very, very intense, immersive 8 days that I'm still processing and haven't written about yet because it's that new and raw. I don't usually, I didn't put my head underwater. I did not swim underwater. I did not swim in deep water. This has been a lifelong thing. And we get to the first cenote. I went to 3 cenotes and 2 lagoons. And so if you know anything about cenotes, if you don't, definitely look them up. But if you do, they're kind of endless at the bottom. They go way down there. There's underwater caves and all that. So you actually have to go down into a cave to get into the water for most cenotes. And then you're in a cave in water. And I love caves. I have this massive passion for caves. We get down there, and I'm not going to share the depth of detail now from a cosmic experience. If you know, you know. I just say that. I'm still, that's pretty fresh. Not that I've had these experiences my whole life. It's just not something I always talk about in depth. But I got ready to get in. We made a big crystal grid. They have all these amazing tools from all over the world. And one of them works directly with the maker of these tools. And so we're hanging out on the dock and just having the best time and gridding. And we'll talk more about it, but we're gridding. And we're working with the earth elements and the tools and all that, and ourselves and our energy and what's coming through. This group does a tremendous amount of light language. So when we all come together, it's way on board. So we're doing all of this, major everything, light language, activations. And so everybody starts getting in the water. And I had gotten a life preserver, a PFD in case. And so this lady before me turns around backwards and says, "I surrender," and falls back. And she was scared. She took her life preserver and she just fell back. And now this woman's an avid swimmer, lives close to the ocean, on the ocean, all of that. So I'm going to do that. I'm all good. No. And I get up there, but instead I look down. I don't turn around backwards. I look down in the water and I have I'm no longer here in this time and place. The part of here that did exist was it was Atlantis and Lemuria. And I had a full-on terrifying experience, but it transmuted very quickly. And I'm one who faces fears the minute I recognize them. I'm going to face them. I'm committed to it. And I looked in there and I just saw a replay of a lot of tragedy. And immediately started losing my physical faculties. And I was about to faint. And I could feel myself losing myself. And so I went and got my friend Marika, who's the facilitator of the retreat and my dear sister and friend. And she just happened to have come back up on the deck. This is all divinely orchestrated, and she's the only one there. And I go over and I call her by name, and I'm shaking. I'm like, I could barely have a voice. And she said, "Oh, honey, you're remembering." And I fell to the ground, to the dock. And so we did light language, we did our work, we did all this work. And I said, I'm going to do this. I got it. And so we're clearing. I'm even coughing up water. It's an energetic thing that people either have had the experience or not, but it's very visceral and very real for me. So, right. So flash forward, I got in the water by myself on my own free will. I went into the deep water with no device to assist me. And the only thing that you can hold on to is the ladder or swim-aways to some lava rocks you can hold on to. And they're tiny, like you barely have anything to hold on to. And I got over to the lava rocks and I heard very clearly, "Bring your feet up to your hands." So I've got hands here, feet under me, and I'm just barely hanging on like by a thread. And I heard, "Push off with your feet and surrender." I had no idea if I was going to sink or swim. I had no idea how to sink or how to swim. So I just pushed off and I was floating. And I floated around that entire cenote, and I had no idea how to float. I have never been taught how to float. It was all done through that innate remembering. And I learned to swim on my back and everything. I was getting around great. Couple of times I got the panic again because I was breathing extremely labored. I kept feeling energetically my lungs filling up. So I would go back to the rock or the dock and hold on, and everybody was, "Do you need help?" No, I got this. I'm doing it. So I did it. And I was so proud of myself. And I'm not usually a pride person, but I thought, that's huge. And so the second cenote, I had a way deeper experience. It was a much it was a much larger, way more huge cenote. And the only place there was no place to hang on anywhere. Once you were out there, and it was huge, like a big lake. And I looked at the furthermost point that happened to be under the cave opening where the sun rays were coming in, all these light codes. And I said, I'm going out there. And they said, you probably need some assistance. You probably want a life jacket. Not they all, but some people were very concerned, and they rightfully so. And I said, I see a man standing out there and he's got his arms out. He's having a spiritual experience. You can see it. And I said, I'm going out there. I'm doing that when he's done. Is there a place for me to stand? And they said, well, probably not for a 5-foot tall person, but we'll go out there with you and make sure you can stand. And so flash forward, after some working through it, I went out there and I stood on those rocks. And then 2 of my sisters came over and said, you need to come get these diamond light codes. So they put me on my back. I'm floating, and I did it by myself. I floated and went over under these drops that are dropping down from the opening of the cave. And they kept going into my eyes. And everybody else says, normally you do them on your third eye or whatever, but they kept going in my eyes. And the next thing I know, and they knew it, my dear sister Marika knew it, I was about to go out of body. And I was gone. But I do remember it, and I do remember everything. And I said, okay, I'm surrendering the physical body, which I lost again, all faculties. I could not feel any part of this physical body. And then I said, I'm being told I have to surrender my mental body, which I've been working on all week. I completely surrender. And there was a time I remember silently saying, if I end up at the bottom of the cenote, it's perfectly beautiful and it's all okay. And I've had a wonderful, beautiful life. And I really did surrender. And I let go. I just went back, and I had nothing holding me up but energy. And so my dear sisters, there's even a picture that I didn't know about that someone that lives there locally took. And I got the pictures and video later from above the cenote, but I was being held. So they're all around me, holding me and floating me. And there's light language, and there's just, I remember ascending up into the sky. I remember in great detail. So it's definitely the deepest practice of my life of surrender. I've had others, but it was so much so that I've had a few near-death experiences in my life. I've had one really strong one in 2020. Was in a coma and all of that. And this was like the next level of that. So in a coma, you're medically supported. And this time, I did it all through free will. And so, yes, that would explain why it's a little bit on my heart, soul, and mind right now, because it was the most freeing experience of my life. And it affirmed that I am to continue traveling and work with these lands and these elements and these cultures and the codes. Thank you for letting me share that.
That's an amazing experience. You have to share her, your sister that does these excursions. Please also share her website if she has one. I can put it on your episode link if you want to.
Okay.
It's her journeys sound just amazing.
I'll connect with, she's amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were going to talk to us about gridding too. Are you willing to talk to us about your work with gridding?
I am. I'm not quite sure how it's going to come out and be articulated.
Okay.
So in my travels, I started realizing I am gridding. Now, I knew all about gridding way before then, but I knew about gridding from using physical tools. I call them sacred tools or sacred elements, crystals, etc. And it's just innate within me. Years ago, I just started assembling things, and they might look like a mandala when I'm done, but there's some symmetry in it, but there's some symmetry within the asymmetry of it. But what I started realizing over years, and I do shamanic work, and that somebody had to tell me that's what I was doing. I wasn't I did go through shamanic training and all of that, but I didn't really adopt that as a label, if you will. And I became trained as a shamanic Reiki master and things like that. And so all of this has always been very natural for me once it was activated within me. I didn't know as a kid. I played with, and I'm very, very, very nature-based. So I like to collect elements and make grids. It's not just something I've purchased or whatever. And I've done this for a very long time. And somebody said to me one time, "Oh my gosh, you're gridding when you travel." And I said, "Yeah, I make grids all over the place." They, "No, you're literally gridding the earth with the cosmos." And I was like, I am. Like, I knew that was a remembering, and it was an activation for me. It was a remembering. And I thought, wow. And so when I first met my dear sister, I'm talking about Marika, and we bring all these crystals and we each make our own little individual grids in our room. And the next thing I know, we're all traveling all around the Mount Shasta area gridding. And I realized I've been doing this for a long time, and not in group, just by myself. And I will also say, I feel that it's in alignment that I can share this because it's not about me. My husband is participatory in this in his way. So he'll bring me things. "Oh, I found this," and he knows what I'm gonna do with it. "I found this is for you. I found this is for the grid. I found this is for whatever you feel called to do with it." And so he participates in it, and he knows that everywhere we go, I'm going to be collecting nature elements, and they communicate with me. Where do they stay there? Where do they go somewhere else? Where do they want to go? An example I could share is that I am called, when I go to these sacred vortex places, which to me, all land is sacred, but most people will know what that means, a sacred vortex. I'm guided to collect water. And then I take that to the next sacred vortex, to the next sacred vortex. So I just basically use the elements of earth, air, fire, water, and ether. When I talked about my grids, I started realizing, back to the shamanic work, I work with the medicine wheel. That's one terminology for it. I work with mandalas, I work with the medicine wheel, I work with these different sacred geometry symbols and the elements. And I also always add ether, because I'm working with the cosmos. So from my understanding and I don't mean from learning this outside of myself, from the way I receive it and the knowing that I have, is that they're the cosmic grids, and those connect down with, of course, right now I'm talking about Earth. I can't speak to other planets, but I can. I know it's a cosmic grid. And so that grid is, that same blueprint grid is within Mother Earth. And time has created interruptions, obstacles for this connection of these grids. So as we're traveling and intuitively being guided what to do with the elements and where to go, even driving, I want to share this with you based off our previous conversation. Hopefully it's okay to say, I feel like it is. When you're driving and doing light language, you are gridding, and I get so activated every time. And I know you know this, but you are gridding. And so you're not just driving around Dallas doing light language while you're trying to navigate. You are, that's what you're doing. You're gridding.
Yeah,
and so we don't always have conscious awareness of the intention or what, but we know we're just doing it. It's like you said, when you speak light language, it just moves. It's like, it's ready. It just comes, and so it's the same thing for me. And some people are very consciously aware with specific agendas is not a good way. Specific intentions. Okay, I'm going to connect this grid node to this grid node. I don't get into the science of it. It's all intuitive. So I don't get in. I'm a science person. I love science. I should say quantum physics more than anything. I'm very much into the physics and quantum physics of things and that aspect of it, but I don't define it. I don't really have a language for it at this point, and I don't feel called to this node goes to this node to the, it's just, they're anchor points is what I'm hearing. They're anchor points. and activation. They anchor and activate. So if I'm called to go to Tulum and I don't answer the call, or the group doesn't answer the call, for their energy and their essence and the activations within them and the light codes that they are, then it's not becoming fully realized and gridded.
Well, so just to break in for a second. So what they explain, they as in the beings that I work with. And so some people will talk about their guides and their helpers. Mine is a council of beings, and the beings are higher aspects of me. They're not outside of me. And your spirit guides and your helpers are not outside of you. They're aspects of you. But I follow the guidance of the beings, whatever, some people would, and it is God's source, because we're a God source, right? We're sparks of God. And so the beings talked to me a long time ago about the codes dropping, even before I knew what light language was. Mm-hmm. They told me that what I was doing was dropping codes. And so whenever I'm driving and I'm doing light language, I'm dropping codes along the road. And it could, gridding is, I think, maybe another word for that. But you mentioned that you're making connections, right? So the codes are making connections. One of my sisters in the community described it as I'm crop dusting light language, crop dusting codes.
Yes.
As I'm going down the highway doing 80, dropping codes, and that I'm crop dusting codes. But
I love that.
What another thing that I discovered, or that the being shared with me, is that we make all these agreements, right, to be here at this place at this time. And in the way of surrendering, if you for some reason get distracted and you can't be at that place at that time, the universe has an alternate plan for that, right? And so if you and your sisters, your group, couldn't be there in Tulum to have done this gridding, there would have been somebody else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So part of the surrender process is also, and I don't mean this the way that it may be coming across. There is no guilt, there is no shame if you can't be where you've made a commitment to be, because someone else is going to step in and do it. I know that even for me, when I'm out and about, and for instance, if I see someone on the corner asking for money, asking for help, sometimes I rarely ever carry cash. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have cash to give them. And so what I'll say, or what I'll know, is someone else will come along to give them what they need. And I just, as your word surrender, I surrender to that, knowing that it's not always for me to do it. That there is always another person to take up that mantle and and do what needs to be done. It's not an excuse, though. For those that are listening, it's not an excuse for not doing what you agreed to do. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm awfully, and I get hoarse. I don't know about you, but I get hoarse when something's really trying to come out.
Yes.
It's all part of the light language process. Mm-hmm. So, so it's not a matter of making excuses for not upholding your commitments, but it's a fine dance, a dance of knowing, do I surrender and give up control of having to do this? Do I give up my ego that says, oh, you agreed to do this and you're so important and you have to go do this? Mm-hmm. Am I willing to give up that control and say, it's going to be done? it's not just for me to do it. And I'm talking to myself too. It's not just for me to do it. It's, there's an agreement. And although I made this blueprint of agreements, and they're telling me that you already know this, there are layers, because when we came here in our, what would you call it, limited teachings, in our distorted, fallen programs of teachings, which I used to uphold, and a lot of us used to uphold because we didn't know any better. The program of we came here with the blueprint, one blueprint, right? The program was, you came here with a blueprint and you've got to stick by that blueprint and you got to do what you promised to do. But the beings have great laughs about me and my little, my condensed view of things sometimes. And so the beings went, honey, you have got layers and layers and layers of blueprints. You have got multidimensional layers of blueprints that you can choose from at any point in time. You are not anchored to that one thing that you said you would do. So.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful you shared all that, because that is what I resonate with and share, and how I live and teach. And in your words, it's so, I have many examples of that. I was really, really, really called to go to Egypt several years ago, and it was very, very strong calling, yet my house was on the market. It was selling. I had shamanic training to get to in Seattle. I had somewhere to be in Connecticut. I had all these places to be. And I just kept thinking, well, do I surrender all these other plans? Do I go? And the more I checked in and just really connected, I was like, okay, it's not that I need to go to Egypt in the physical. It's that I'm to connect with this energetic grid, if you will, with these other people. And I had an entire group of friends go to Egypt. And I went to 3 other places while they were there. I was in Seattle, and then I was in Texas, and then I was in Connecticut, and I kept being shown I was making like a triangle in the US. So I only share that as an example, is that, the surrender does not mean, the word I got when you were talking is responsibility. It is not my responsibility alone. It is that we're all connected, and it's a collective. But I will say, when I personally surrender, I'm going to have expansion and more opportunities to do more of what I feel I have agreed to do, and my calling and my mission. So, yeah. And so then, I know you've been to Egypt many times. So recently, Egypt has been in just once. Okay. No, I was hearing your Glastonbury, where you've been to Glastonbury many times.
Yeah.
You did go to
Glastonbury, yeah.
So I will tell you, in the last 6 months, I've probably had at least 15 conversations with people about Egypt and their experiences in Egypt and different things they were doing. When my friends went into the group that went into the different temples and the King's Tomb, I was literally energetically having that experience wherever I was. And I was journaling and writing about it, and they matched. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really what you were doing at this time. And so I just expanding upon what I was saying. And I love that you shared that, because I think that's where the surrender can be difficult, if you will, in that I talked about this in a writing I did this morning. It's that constant checking in with self of, am I in alignment, or am I trying to use an unhealthy aspect of ego to convince myself I have to be there, or the opposite, I'm not ready, I'm not worthy, anything like that. It's just being in that alignment. And then I feel like I know when to say yes, and when to be, I can be here and still be there energetically. So that grid, I love that you said all of that, because that grid is that. It's that collective. And that also requires us to not be in separateness, consciousness of, it has to be me, or I have to be the one, or whatever, because you witness the grid a lot more. You witness the connections. Oh, I'm here, they're here, that, all this is happening. I don't know if hopefully that makes sense, but that's what I was getting when you were talking is, it's not Terri Malek's responsibility alone by any means. It is a collective. And one
Yeah.
time I was working with wolves and bison in person at Yellowstone, and we had to hike pretty far back to get to this place. And this woman comes down the hill playing a flute, a shamanic flute, native flute. And we immediately knew each other. Like, we remembered, and we're singing and we're doing all this stuff. And I'm going, wow, I already know what you do before you even introduced yourself. And she's from Ecuador and was told to be there at this time and this date. And we both had permits rejected on certain dates and had, it's just
Wow.
divinely orchestrated. And yeah, thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
I was gonna. I was going to share. We bilocate, I mean, that's the word that humans came up with, but we bilocate, and I have a couple of examples, but one of the most heartwarming example for me is when I did women's retreats. And I stopped doing those because the women's retreats were so intense, emotionally so intense. There was so much clearing that happened and so much healing that happened, but they were exhausting. And I gave up, I surrendered, and I gave up control of that part of healing and helping other people, because I found that I wanted to work with people who were ready to expand, not focus on their woundedness. And that's not a judgment toward, anybody that came to the retreat. They came to heal. But I gave up the need to provide that platform anymore. And I chose the platform of helping people remember and expand instead. But during the time of these retreats, it was maybe one of the last 3 or 4 of them, because we gather these communities in our work through Facebook, and through other social outlets. We gather these communities, and one of the sisters in my Facebook circle had always wanted to come to the women's retreat, and but she physically never did, apparently. But anyway, once she finally, and so we had created a women's group on Facebook, where we all talked and shared. And every time we shared something about the previous women's retreat, they would include her in it. They would say, "Oh yeah, you remember, da 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 da," and she's like, "I wasn't there." And they were like, "Yes, you were." She's not, "I wasn't there," And this happened like 3 separate women's retreats. Her name's Kimberly. And every time they would say, "Oh, you remember?" And she was like, "I was not there." And so finally, when she finally physically came to a women's retreat, we were all like treating her, this is nothing new, but she was brand new. She had never been like, but she had energetically, cosmically been there all of those other times. Wow. And participated in everything. I mean, we all saw her there, but she wasn't in the third dimensional body. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And people have, I know that people do that consciously. I know that people have the gift, the knowledge, the remembering to do that consciously. I don't. And there's been a few times when people have told me that I appeared to them at different times, full body apparitions, they would say. I don't have any conscious knowledge of doing it. I didn't do it on purpose. But so yeah, we don't have to physically go to these vortex locations, but it's fun.
It is fun.
It's
Yes.
fun to go
It's fun.
and see it in person and experience it in person. It took me 3 tries before I got to Egypt.
Wow.
I started planning. My first plan was March of 2020.
Mhm.
I wanted to be, I was actually led to believe that I was supposed to be there on my 65th birthday. It was so important for me to be there for whatever was going to occur. And so I booked, and I was supposed to leave on March the 18th. March the 17th, they shut down all the flights. And then I rebooked it for 2021. And I actually canceled that one because I was given the insight that because of the testing to get back into the US, that for some reason I would have a false positive and it would delay me coming back. So I canceled that one.
Mhm.
But all because there was a specific group of women that I was supposed to go with. And I was waiting for that specific group of women.
Mm. Yeah,
So it all worked out,
absolutely.
it all worked out. But Glastonbury calls me back all the time. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on when I'm there. And because that's my home, that's my base, and then I travel out from there. But
Mhm.
the women that we met in Egypt, the group that came together, there were 13 of us, and 8 of them asked me, when Sharon and I shared that we were going to the UK, they were like, "Can we go? Can we join you?" So there are 8 of us of that group that are going to gather again in the UK. And
Oh, wow.
I'm so excited because they're from all over. One sister is from Australia, one is from New Zealand, one is is currently living in Sweden. One is from not Tasmania. Anyway, another country, and then a couple are here in the U.S. up north and wherever. But I'm so excited, that we get to come because we form such a bond. This group of women. It was amazing, really was. So I
That's
hope
so
that you get to go
wonderful.
physically to Egypt. I encourage you to go with a group, with a tour. It is very
Mhm.
important to go with the tour for a lot of reasons. And so, yeah, I hope that you're the one that you call your dear sister. I hope that she creates a tour going to Egypt, because that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure would. I actually have a friend moving from Mount Shasta back to her home of Sweden, but she used to do quite a few. She's the one that used to facilitate these retreats. I don't know, it's kind of a wet, and there's several different connections of all these groups. So yeah, we'll see how that transpires. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's all just it's just all so beautiful. And I do like that phrase, divinely orchestrated. It's just I don't resonate at all with guilt and shame and blame or any of that. So it's like, if it's in alignment this time, great. I've had experiences too where I really thought, when I went into the coma and had a physical experience 18 months before that, I almost had that experience. And they kept saying, you're going to have surgery and this and this and that. And I said no. And I mean, this actually had what people call psychic surgery. I had a whole experience, and I was able to go to this trip where I met 87 women, and all of these other connections have birthed from that. And so energetically, I had to be at that place. And so the physical kind of went on hold, for until another time. But point being is, yeah, it's just amazing, the connections. I guess you would say here on earth and beyond. But
Mhm.
it's I like that you share that, because I just have so much resonance with who you are and what you share and what you do. And it's very refreshing, because there is, again, I called it earlier kind of that lack consciousness or separateness consciousness. There's still a lot of teachings around that. And I just don't give it energy. I don't have resonance with that being my mission, or it's
Yeah.
not my remembering. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Once you have those awakenings, even if they're mini ones, they stack up. But once you have those awakenings and you realize that there is no separateness, that we have been everything at one point, everything. We've played every role, every part. It just takes the bite out of judgment.
Yes, yes.
Once you realize that you've been that thing that you're judging, that you can't judge anymore.
Yeah.
And because we're all here to have an experience. And sometimes the experience is the agreement to experience is to be the bad guy. Someone has to be the bad guy in order to provide the mirror for others to wake up. And so it just takes the bite out of the judgment. So in your bio, you're an author. Did you tell me about a book?
I have a book. I think it was my brain just kind of escaped me. 2017, June of 2017 is when it was published. It's called My Path to Omega.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon, and in ebook or print. I don't have it as Audible. It is basically up to that point. It was written almost 3 years before I even published it. So, it was finished pretty much in 2014.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know I was going to publish it. And it just many iterations of what I had written. But it was basically my journey up to that point. I have many other writings that have not been published that are all over the computer and flash drives and different drives and all of that. And I really keep getting the strong call I am writing. I write every day. Certain things are fleshing out for other books. And that one will have, when that happens, that one will have a volume 2. I've got some edits and some changes. But yeah, I'm just kind of letting it ride out there until the next one is ready to be in form. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you that's coming across your peripheral that you wanted to share before we close?
The only thing that I was receiving a little bit ago when you were speaking is I want to say thank you, but I want to extend it further to others. Is thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for all of your sharings and the conversation and the messages that have moved through you. It's not a coincidence that everything I wrote about this morning is what you spoke to. So thank you for that. And it just again further supports what we're talking about, is just the dropping the codes and doing the, we're creating activations in everything we do, everything we say, everywhere we go. We just aren't mindful to be aware of that. And so surrendering to self and knowing that and following that guidance, but also not having any judgment of self. I call it don't self-sabotage. Don't self-sabotage and beat yourself up about could have or should have or would have or whatever. It's just when you have those experiences of surrender, it opens up so many more opportunities for you to be more of who and what you are in your essence and your wholeness. And so everything you have said today too fully supports that. So thank you for that. And thank you for this opportunity to express things that I really haven't talked about at all publicly. So thank you for that.
And we didn't touch on light language.
You're right. That's a little more on board for me now. They're short stints. I've been doing light language through my hands and even the drawings, the I'm not quite sure, the codes, off and on for several years. I don't do it intentionally or overly active. It's just as it moves through, but with others, it's very activated. So we did a significant amount of that on this trip. And so I did have more the activations of that. And it's being shared now with my sessions with clients. It just comes through. And so, yes, I was saying to you, Patricia, before the recording that I'm really grateful because, sometimes you're just called to something and you might not. I've always been called to the light language, and I very much have discernment of who has the messages and the codes or so forth for me. And yeah, so that's exciting. It's a whole new, more music, more toning, more singing, more music, more instruments. All of that is really coming on board for me to have a way of expressing the various ways as things are coming through me. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I love how people are awakening to it, remembering it, because it is us. It's our first language, and so, but again, there's those distortions in the matrix, in the grid, that are being healed. And as the distortions are healed, then more people are reconnecting. So isn't that, I mean, that's what is the word? That's interesting, that you had shared about your group going out and reconnecting those points that were broken or distorted in the grid. And so the beings are showing me that work being done. And as your group and others are reconnecting, repairing those breaks, more people come online. Mm-hmm. How amazing is that?
Yes, thank you for that. And I have the most beautiful experiences with people everywhere I go. The world that's out pictured on, I mean, I don't have TV and haven't for most of my life. But I mean, through social media and conversation, you see what's going on out there, and it's not the world that I live and that I experience. It's so beautiful. And those connections are everywhere. And I mean, it could be the cashier that's selling you a beverage or whatever, it's so potent when you have that, I call it like panning out and observing that broader view, the connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Yeah, it is amazing, the conversations that you can have. So speaking of that, we're Texas girls, right?
Yes.
And I saw a meme the other day. I guess it was TikTok, but they said when Americans go to, I think it was when Americans go to Scotland. So they had like a skit, like a Saturday Night Live kind of skit. And so they had this skit where, it was a pub, and these two Americans came in, a couple, a man and a woman came in with their fanny packs on, their caps, their t-shirts, and their cargo pants, cargo shorts, looking very touristy. Of course, they have to buff it up, right? And so they come in, and they're like, "Hey, how are y'all doing?" They walk in the door, "How you doing today?" And they greet everybody, and they're so full of joy and full of laughter. And the people are sitting there looking at them going, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yes.
And so I immediately just bust out laughing when I saw that, because that was me. That's me when I go anywhere. That's me when I went to Egypt. That's me when when I go to the UK, and I get the same reaction. It's like, something wrong with her.
Yeah. It
It's
is, it is
Texas is
fun.
a very friendly state.
Yes, we make friends with
We
everybody.
speak to people when we acknowledge people and we say, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I can imagine you traveling even all over the US,
Mhm.
the different caliber of people that you meet, and when they open themselves up, what amazing conversations you can have.
Oh, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
amazing. And when people do open themselves up, which most of the time I experience happening, they might be caught off guard at first, but then they'll engage. And
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter your background, your culture, your perspectives and views on things. It just becomes this human connection that's beautiful.
Mhm.
And I know that's also part of, again, the other people gave me the word, I didn't know to call it, but that's also part of the gritty, dropping the codes. There's activations happening in everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Whatever happens, you're doing it. But like even when I'm facilitating light language for somebody, there are times when the beings will tell me, because people want to close their eyes and go inside and receive, right? And so there are times when the beings will say, have them open their eyes, and
Mhm.
they will have me direct
Use
light
codes.
language eye to eye.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it reminded me of how important it is to make eye contact with people, because there are codes.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
one of my sisters that used to partner with me in a light language, and she co-wrote, she was one of the co-authors for the first light language book. Whenever she speaks light language or transmits light language to me, in my direction purposely, I literally can sense codes coming from her frontal cortex out to me. I have never noticed that with anybody else when they're transmitting light language, but when she does,
Oh.
and I'm not a visual person, I'm claircognizant where I just know what I know,
Mhm.
but I can literally perceive codes coming at me whenever
Wow.
she transmits light language. So I can attest to that part of it, but only from her. But yeah, so we I mean, from every part of our being, from all of our cells, and we're always emitting codes and frequencies. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, my computer is doing some weird and funky things, so I should probably, I know I need to plug it in, but thank you so much for coming online. And let me plug this in before it closes us out.
Okay.
So thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk with us. And I look forward to your second book.
Thank you.
And I'll have to buy the first one so that I can look forward to the second one. But I look forward to hearing your stories and your adventures and that trip to Egypt. I look forward to hearing what happens on that trip to Egypt.
Thank you for all of that and those reminders too, to keep that in my purview.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. This has been such an honor and a beautiful, wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing this. Not just mine, but starting this podcast. I've already gotten all caught up. I'm excited.
It's the big thing now, isn't it? It's another way for us to communicate.
Yes.
And I think it's a great thing. We'll see how far it goes, but it's a good thing. It keeps people in contact, even if they're just watching. They're getting the codes.
Yes.
So even if they're just watching, they're being coded to remember.
Yeah.
Even from home.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think it's a good thing.
Yes, me too.
So I will certainly see you in the circle,
Okay.
the Facebook
Wonderful.
circle. if nothing else.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you very much. And until next time, I appreciate it.
Until next
Grateful.
time. So I'm going to close this out.
Okay.
And we'll see all of you guys at the next podcast.